Once again, I'm Cynthia Fox, totally honored to be joined at this moment in time by a true legend, Henry Diltz. Henry, we're so not worthy, but thank you for sitting down with us.
Thank you. Please.
No, you were
Thank
amazing.
you.
And you are also, obviously, because this is your gallery, right? The Morrison Hotel Gallery. You are part of this Neil Young show that's opening November 10th through the 18th. That's going to feature your work, Julie Gardner's, Joel Bernstein, and Danny Clinch, too. But you have, I'll imagine, some incredible insights into Neil since you go back.
Well, I've known Neil quite a long time. I first met Neil in the mid-'60s when I was still playing music myself. So I met him as a musician before I ever picked up a camera, but not long before. I think he got to town right in the middle '60s and started the Buffalo Springfield with Stephen Stills, whom I'd known for quite a few years before that. But Neil came here fresh from Canada. And since I knew Stephen really well, I met Neil and saw them sing many times around town and was in the recording studio with them.
You are so blessed. What an amazing life to see where everything started. Those seminal moments.
You know, it didn't seem that way then. It just seemed like, you know, every day was a great day. Get up and see what happens. I mean, Laurel Canyon was full of musicians. The Troubadour was full of musicians. I was one myself and picked up a camera by accident and started photographing all my friends in Laurel Canyon. And
do you know how many people would have loved to live your life?
Yeah.
To be in such a creative, oh my goodness, it's like being in the Renaissance or something.
Well,
Just
you know, it
everywhere
is.
you turn, someone else is doing something innovative and creative and collaborative.
You know, looking back, it's easy to kind of see it that way. But at the time, it was everyday life. I mean, life was good. There was a real spark in the air. Music,
Yes.
people were writing songs for the first time. And, you know, I came from being a folk musician. And most everybody was a folk musician first. And then we all went electric and the Beatles played Ed Sullivan. And then we became folk rock. And then you had the Byrds and the Buffalo Springfield. And I was in a folk group called the Modern Folk Quartet. And then we went electric as well, and we're a folk rock group.
But the through line through all the folk into today with Neil is this wonderful engagement with the issues. And I always feel like this is what lends the music so much more depth. Because it's about, we're not, pretending that there aren't some really serious issues in society, and we're not afraid to address them. And try to inspire people to maybe get engaged and get out there, make a difference, volunteer, vote, et cetera, and I love the fact that, as you know, Neil has kept that fire burning. It's like he's never going to let up with some of the things, and that's what I find so great about the folk tradition too.
Sure, you know, I mean, I think the seeds of all of that, political consciousness and earth consciousness,
Yes.
Came with the singer-songwriter thing that happened. Of course, in folk music, you had a bit of that, but when people started writing their own songs, then they started singing about their own feelings, because before that, there were songwriters and singers. Frank Sinatra never wrote a song. Elvis Presley never wrote a song. There were the songwriters who wrote mostly, you know, sort of love songs, breaking up songs, Moon, June, Spoon. And then when, you know, in the middle '60s, when all the sort of hippies started writing their own feelings about the world and our emerging consciousness, you know, through all the stuff we did in the 60s.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Yes, raising the consciousness.
Exactly. And then people started writing what was on their own minds and singing their own thoughts. And that, you know, started the whole sort of putting that into music.
Well, could I say thank you for being part of that? Because of you being part of this movement, it gave permission to artists throughout the globe to pursue that. I know this is a little off topic, but it's when the Beach Boys went and played, for instance, Behind the Iron Curtain. This made such a difference to an artist by the name of Peter Siss. Things started to change because you and all these other artists were expressing themselves through this creative freedom, it actually got the rest of the world thinking, I want that too. Right?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it kind of spread the joy, the joy that comes from music, and which they didn't
finding
really...
the creativity within themselves too.
Exactly, yeah.
But let's talk about your photos though.
Yeah. Sure,
Look behind us.
There's
only
Neil
like,
Young.
only like
Look.
Another classic defining moment for Neil. And how did you just happen to be, again, right place, right time?
Well, there were a lot of people that I photographed a lot in the late 60s, early 70s, and they were the Laurel Canyon singer-songwriters, Joni Mitchell and the Mamas and Papas and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young and people like that. And so, Neil and I both knew a graphic artist named Gary Burden, who was his art director. And Gary and I would go up to Neil's ranch and spend the night and walk around in the morning and check out the cattle on the hill, check out the various barns and things. I think this day we stopped by a little barn to look at a guitar that he had in the back of the barn. And when I turned around, Neil was standing outside looking down the road, and I just turned around and took a quick picture. It wasn't something that we set up, it just was a moment that happened. And that's the way I photographed Neil. We never set up anything.
Really?
Oh gosh, no! I just documented what I saw.
Oh my God.
Kind of fly on the wall,
Oh my God!
Well, I never.
Do you feel a lot of pressure? I mean, it's such a spontaneous sort of thing.
There's no pressure that way.
Pressure.
The pressure is if you've got lights and a backdrop, and you
see.
say, okay, now look at the camera, smile. I mean, I never did that in my life. I didn't go to photo school, so I didn't know how to use lights in a studio. I just photographed what I saw with God's light,
Beautiful. It's such an incredible moment because you feel like, that's exactly the essence of what we get from Neil's music.
It looked beautiful that morning, but the whole morning was great. We walked around and checked out the llamas, and he had an emu. Is it emu or emu? One of those big birds like an ostrich.
Amazing, right?
And rode around in his Jeep, bouncing around the pastures in his old World War II Jeep. And I just kept clicking whatever happened, and we did that quite a few times. And back then, we would use these pictures in songbooks mostly. Yeah. Because when they put out a book of music, of songs, they'd have a lot of photos in there. And but the thing about Neil, you were talking about having a consciousness and sharing that. Neil's a Scorpio. So, I'm kind of into this, I was a psychology major in college, which just makes me interested in people and what makes them tick. Right. So he's a Scorpio, and Scorpios pretty much know what they want. They know what they want, they know what they don't want. Right. And he's always been that way. But beyond that, his Chinese animal is a rooster. And I find that kind of interesting. If you look up Chinese astrology, you'll see the animal for the year you were born. Okay. He's a rooster. Now, roosters declare. You think, they wake up. They say, wake up, everybody, and they sort of say stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's Neil,
It's like waking up that consciousness, waking up the
old
social
man,
consciousness.
take a look at yourself. You're a lot like me. All of that. He came bouncing across the water, or whatever, however that lyric went.
But it's true because he's trying to wake people up to having more of an ecological consciousness, to respecting Native Americans and indigenous people's rights. This is all fantastic. That an artist is still doing it, articulating it. It gives permission to
just all the stuff that we were into in the 60s when it was peace and love and brotherhood. And we all kind of woke up at the same time and said, well, why are we going overseas to shoot people we don't know? That was the first thing,
Right. But it's good. It's good because you're waking people up to question things and look around and saying, what kind of choices are we making? And are these the best choices we can? And like I said, I love what you've captured here. And again, hats off to you because you were... It didn't bother him that you had the camera and you were doing all that. He just was like, he in other words, was he more just, yes.
More at ease. Well, because I wasn't really a photographer. I was a musician with a camera, you know. I mean, I wasn't an assignment. You know, I wasn't being paid by somebody to go and spend an hour taking his picture. We were just hanging out. We were friends, and so, you know, it wasn't professional, you know. That's the whole thing. So it was a look at real life, and that's all I've really always cared about.
And I think that's what people, fans, are really hungry for too, is that sense of connection, that sense of authenticity, like someone who's really expressing what they really feel. So we invite all of our listeners to please come by the Morrison Hotel Gallery. It's November 10th through 18th. It's Neil Young, photographs by the legendary Henry Diltz. Oh, thank you for making the time. Joel Bernstein, Danny Clinch, of course, legendary Julie Gardner, who we spoke to too. And you've really all captured so many, you know, sides of Neil and so many aspects of Neil.
Yeah, and there are a lot of sides and a lot of aspects, you know. And Julie's seen a whole other side of Neil more currently in his concerts and his playing.
Right, on tour.
Yeah, and I actually saw him just a couple weekends ago out in Coachella, and he was so great. I mean, he was singing Harvest Moon as the full moon rose above the stage.
Could you ask for
Everybody's taking, you know, cell phone photos.
Yes.
It was amazing.
Indeed. Well, again, it's here at the Sunset Marquis Hotel, 1200 Altaloma Road. The exhibit is November 10th through the 18th, but you can also find, if people want to purchase the print, they can go online too.
They could go to morrisonhotelgallery.com.
If they can't make it to the actual exhibit, they can find it and say, I've got to do this because this is remarkable. Well, thank you for some more insights into
Thank you, Cynthia.
all the great work, album covers, everything that you've done. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you very much. My pleasure.